This is Dane Wigington with Geoengineeringwatch.org. This is the fifth installment of Climate Engineering Q&A. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can in these ongoing 20 to 25 minute segments. I apologize for not being able to get to all questions that have been submitted. I'll roll over others into upcoming sessions of Climate Engineering Q&A. I greatly appreciate all those that took the time to write in. If you wish to submit a question to be addressed on Climate Engineering Q&A, you can do so through the following email address: questions@geoengineeringwatch.org. Let's get started. First question from Joey. Joey asks, I just moved from Southern California to Eastern Tennessee. It seems that geoengineering is more intense here than coastal San Diego. Why would that be? Joey, it depends on the season, depends on the weather systems that are coming in during that season, where the skies will be more heavily aerosolized. During other parts of the seasonal year, there are parts of California that are heavily aerosol sprayed. So again, there's a great many variables. Also, the entire climate system is in a state of flux. It is unraveling. Climate engineering is further fueling that unraveling process. So everything is in a state of flux, and certain regions will be hit harder at different times of the years or as we move further into the future, depending on the agendas and objectives of the climate engineers. But as a whole, planetarily, the aerosol spraying operations continue to be further ramped up. And this does not bode well for life on Earth or for humanity. Next question, just from Ressi. Ressi asks, is the USA the only country doing the chemtrails, aka climate engineering operations? She continues, geoengineering is in one of my chapters I teach. I also share your website and video with the students. I told my students I think Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, is involved in geoengineering. A student contacted a professor at that college, and the answer is yes, they are involved. Ressi, although MIT may have admitted this off the record, and that's encouraging, certainly there is no official admission to any of these operations being ongoing, although we certainly know that they are, and available data proves that. As far as countries involved, USA, because it has a military that is bigger than the next 10 biggest militaries combined, is certainly the single largest actor in the climate engineering theater of operations. Although all major powers are involved, and in fact, all countries around the globe, with very few exceptions, are either actively or passively participating in the climate engineering operations. Due to the cross-border ramifications of climate engineering, you can't just climate engineer over your own country without affecting the entire world. We know that great effort has been taken over many decades to achieve global cooperations in these programs of omnicide, which is what they should be called at this point, if climate engineering operations continue and the planet is not able to respond to the damage already done on its own. Mathematically, statistically speaking, we are on path to near-term planetary omnicide, but not just the USA. Countries all over the globe, with very few exceptions, are actively or passively participating in these programs. Thank you for your question, Ressi. Next question from Cheryl. Cheryl says, hello. This is in our beautiful sky over Sydney, Australia right now. What chemical would that most likely be? ? And how does it affect us? ? Thank you. Signed, Cheryl. Thank you for your question, Cheryl, from down under. We have a great many constituents being dispersed into the skies above. Highly toxic heavy metal nanoparticulates, polymer nanoparticulates, surfactants. What else we can't know without individual testing in each location every time they disperse, which is obviously impossible. But certainly this mix is highly toxic, and the synergistic toxicity between these elements, Cheryl, is incredibly important to understand, because although they're highly toxic in and of themselves, for example, most know that aluminum is highly toxic, most know that, for example, mercury is highly toxic. We have peer-reviewed study to prove if you combine those two metals, the synergistic toxicity between those two metals can increase the overall toxicity by as much as 10,000%. That's 100 times worse. Now let's add in barium, strontium, polymer fibers, surfactants. This is truly a toxic brew coming down on us. The military-industrial complex has never cared about the consequences of their actions. But now the totality of damage done to the planet is manifesting so rapidly that they can't hide the severity of it much longer. Thus, the other scenarios that we now face, CV-19, actions of the controllers related to that. Again, the equation is becoming much more precarious by the day. Thank you for your question, Cheryl. From Carl. Carl says, hi, Dane. Have you considered growing your own food under a dome? ? Would the soil 6 feet down be worth growing in, or are there no soil microorganisms in your ground where you live? The soil microbiome here in Northern California and many parts of the world has been completely decimated. And the soil pH changes are a part of that. The contamination is a part of that. So the decomposition of forest floor duff, the materials on the forest floor, leaves, pine needles, is almost non-existent now. They sit on the forest floor intact and do not decompose because the soil microbiome has been so devastated. The trees are more or less growthless at this point. They are simply dormant. The forest doesn't smell like a forest because the trees are not breathing, even in the spring and summer months when you would expect the forest to smell like a forest because of the trees respirating through their stomata, their respiratory ports. That's no longer happening because of the intense UV, because of the toxic material that the roots are being exposed to. The roots are dying off. Just like the crowns of the trees are dying off, the roots are also dying off because of this contamination that's, again, not only killing soil microorganisms, but also causing the trees to shut down nutrient uptake, which then causes them to die a slow, protracted death. The intense UV radiation is causing the stomata, the respiratory ports, to shut so the trees don't respirate, they can't feed. So bottom line, back to growing food, when the natural genetically adapted organisms, genetically adapted to the region, when they can't survive, becomes incredibly difficult to grow anything else. So the bottom line answer is we are truly in trouble in regard to growing our own food. Thank you very much for your question, Carl. Next question is from Sonia. Sonia states, "Hi, Dane. First, let me thank you from the bottom of my heart for your tireless work." Thank you, Sonia. It's our collective efforts that can yet make a difference. And all of us are spokes in this wheel, all of us necessary to make it roll. But thank you for your support and to everybody who's taken the time to write into this installment of Climate Engineering Q&A. Sonia continues, "I was so depressed, despondent when I first woke up to chemtrails, i.e. climate engineering, a few years ago. It took months of sifting through dozens and dozens of pages of Google searches results to find you, but was overjoyed when I did find your work. I shudder to think how much harder it is for people to find any credible information on chemtrails, i.e. climate engineering, with the censorship we have these days." Sonia then asks this, "Who is funding all these chemtrails? Do we have specific info on which groups, governments, companies? Thanks again from the bottom of my heart, Sonia." Thank you again, Sonia. In regard to your question, all roads lead back to the central bankers, those who print money, those who fund militaries. They are the ones that are ultimately at the core of all of this insanity. Can't happen without this type of black ops money. Again, the Pentagon missing up to $30 trillion since the late 90s. All of this goes into black ops money. So again, all roads lead back to those who print the money or those who control those who print the money. Next question from Dwayne. Dwayne asks, "What are the reasons given by religious leaders for the destruction of our world at this time? By the supreme deity? Question mark." Dwayne further asks, "Is their overall silence and inaction against the geoengineering assault a testament with what they believe?" Excellent and important question, Dwayne, one that has troubled me deeply and for a very, very long time. I have approached every major spiritual institution leader in North State, where I live, and all of these so-called spiritual leaders initially responded in this way. They said, "We don't need your information on this subject. We don't have to worry about it because it's all in big hands." And these are so-called spiritual leaders from a great variety of traditions. And my challenge to them then was this: show me in your scripture where it says, once a truth like this has been pointed out to you, where it's okay to hide behind a pulpit and preach to your choir without calling them to action to address this. Show me in your scripture where it says that's okay. And none of them could do that. All of them were shamed into taking the data, which I'm sure they later threw in the trash can. And the degree of hypocrisy that's occurring right now within spiritual institutions is truly troubling. That they are more concerned about losing their 501c3 nonprofit than they are addressing an existential threat that is the greatest assault against creation ever launched by the human race, i.e. climate engineering, greatest and most immediate threat we face short of nuclear cataclysm. And we have so-called spiritual leaders hiding behind their pulpits and pretending that it's not their responsibility to address this. And I can only hope that changes. And it's up to the congregation to force responsibility from who they have elected or chosen as their leaders. It's up to congregations at this point. We have seen the enemy and he is us. As Edmund Burke stated so long ago, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And as the Hopi elder stated, we are the ones we've been waiting for. It's up to us. It's up to us, every single one of us, to push this truth to the full light of day and to hold those responsible who are the societal leaders, spiritual leaders, to hold them responsible for doing what they know they should do. From Cameron, this. Next question. I'm so thankful for all the work your organization has done over the years. The information you have obtained and posted has helped me awaken those around me to the truth. Thank you very much for your efforts, Cameron. My thanks to every single activist and individual that is doing the same, to wake others with credible data from a credible source and to ask them to do the same. Cameron continues, I've always wanted to take to the streets to expose geoengineering. Do you have any plans or know anyone with a plan to organize a peaceful protest in California or the West Coast to bring attention to climate engineering? Due to conditions, and this is where CV19 so serves the power structure, to carry out such a demonstration, peaceful demonstration, is now no longer possible. No longer possible to contact agencies, to reach elected officials. All of this so completely serves those in power, along with many other aspects of the CV19 scenario. Now, what do? We have to proverbially fight like the British, in that from our own individual circumstances and locations, again, to share credible data from a credible source, to pass it on to those whom we can, to share online because we can't have physical contact with people due to the CV19 scenario, to start those spot fires of awareness by sharing that credible data in the most effective ways we can, ask others to do the same. And if we all do this, the equation goes exponential very rapidly. Let's consider the math. If an individual shares credible data with two people at the beginning of a 30-day month, first day of a 30-day month, and wakes those people up, and those two wake up two each the second day, and that carries on for 30 days, we're into, I believe it's 5 to 6 million. That's how fast the equation goes exponential. Everybody would simply help to carry this baton forward, to help move this fight forward on the field. Reaching a critical mass is absolutely the only way forward in this fight, so that the entire population knows that mainstream media, official agencies, elected officials are all lying to them about the existence of these programs, in their denial of these programs. We have to reach a critical mass of awareness. Again, that's the only way forward in this fight. And that effort will absolutely take all of us. Thank you for your question, Cameron. Next question from Michael. I know there are a variety of purposes for carrying out weather control programs, one of which is stated to offset global warming. But, Michael asks, if the stratospheric aerosol injection programs had not been employed, what would we have seen in terms of changes in the weather and climate, especially since the end of World War II? ? Would the natural global systems have been able to cope with the warming inherent with CO2 rise in the atmosphere? Michael, in answer to your question, although we can't know exactly the scenario we would be on now had climate engineering operations never been employed, what we can say is this. All data indicates we would be in an exponentially better position than we are now, because the planet has been disabled from any response to the damage being done to it due to climate engineering operations. For example, the planet has been much warmer during previous epochs in the planet's history. The U.S. West Coast during, for example, the Pliocene epoch, 5.2 plus million years ago, warmer planet, higher CO2 levels. Was the Western U.S. incinerating? No, it was much more lush because the planet produces more rain. The climate produces more rain as it warms, as long as the atmosphere is intact, as the atmosphere was then. The ozone layer was not destroyed as it is now. We didn't have an atmosphere full of toxic metal particulates that are contaminating soils and waters throughout the world, killing tree roots, thus disabling the planet's ability to feed on carbon and absorb it and resequester it. So from every conceivable direction, the climate engineering operations have disabled the planet's ability to respond. The shredded ozone layer kills plankton. That's the largest oxygen producer on the planet. Plankton also sequesters carbon, and we're losing the plankton population's two largest carbon sequestering mechanisms on the planet, forests and plankton. And both of them, due to climate engineering as a primary causal factor, not as an only factor, I want to stress that. Every form of human activity that affects the energy balance of the planet or that disrupts the planet's natural life support operations is a form of climate engineering in a sense. The intentional climate engineering operations, worst of all. So bottom line is, we would still have a very different planet, a very damaged planet, but we would certainly be in a much better position than we are now. And let's remember this. The climate engineering operations are not about the greater good. They're not about actually mitigating and helping the climate system to compensate. Climate engineering is about power and control. It always has been. There is nothing benevolent in these programs. It is a form of weather warfare. Due to the highly toxic contaminants, it is a form of biological warfare. And what biologicals may be included in these spray dispersions, we can't know with certainty. The bottom line, climate engineering operations have continued to pound the nails into our collective coffins. Thank you for your question, Michael. Next question is from Norma. Norma asks, is it safe to assume that Agenda 21, geoengineering to control the weather, and the COVID agenda are all working together to usher in the fourth industrial revolution and the, quote, Great Reset? Question mark. These three agendas will usher in the new economic world order. On that conclusion, Norma, it's certainly you're correct that these factors you named are all connected to the same controlling individuals, those who print the money. But the bottom line is, will these agendas and objectives reach fruition? And I would argue no. Biosphere collapse has beat the controllers to the intersection. Now their desperation has gone completely exponential. Geoengineeringwatch.org has stated for the last decade plus that this day would come when biosphere collapse could no longer be hidden. Controller desperation will go exponential. We are there now, and whatever agendas and objectives they have will mean nothing on a planet that no longer supports life. And that's the scenario we face at this point. If we can bring it to light, expose those responsible for some of the crimes you have mentioned so correctly, we could yet change the flavor of the impact that we are all about to face, the concrete wall that we are headed toward at terminal velocity. So again, in summary to your question, a fourth industrial revolution with current technology is not going to happen. We're headed towards a planet that won't support life. And the only great reset, the core great reset, I should say, is nature. We would do well to keep that in mind. Thank you for your question, Norma. Moving on. Gary asks this. Can you direct me to a test kit so that I can test the rain and snow in my state? The spraying in New York is 24 hours a day. I walk at night. I can hear them above the so-called clouds that blanket New York State. During the winter, we don't see the sun for months on end. It's a constant poison in every breath we take. He says that in capital letters with exclamation points. Thank you, Dane, for all that you do for the human race, for sounding the alarm and truth to all. Thank you, Gary. Again, it's a collective effort that can yet make a difference at this late hour. Yes, you can test your precipitation. It's not hard to do. You want to collect it in a sterile plastic or glass container. You need about a pint to test at a certified lab. I would not tell them the reason you are testing. We know that labs do not want, in the middle of this controversy, we have seen multiple compromised tests come from labs that, again, did not want to enter this equation. So if you take it to a state-certified lab, you can ask them to test for aluminum, barium, strontium. Those are primary elements, and don't tell them why, and see what results you get. It's usually about $20 to $25 per metal. Geoengineeringwatch.org would always be grateful to hear the results of those tests. We have yet to conduct one of our own tests that did not show these metals. They're in every single test we take at different levels. We have activists in the field sending us test results at times. We just received test results from Ken, who I believe is from Wisconsin, tested for heavy metals in his rain, aluminum, barium, and on those two metals, I believe the results he got were dozens of times the contaminant action level. Our rain is highly toxic. It's contaminating the entire web of life, every breath we take, as Gary so correctly stated. Thank you for standing with us in this battle, Gary. Next question from Willie. Actually, it's a message and a question. Willie states, I've been telling people about geoengineering for years. I'm so done with this insanity. I certainly relate to how you feel, Willie, but continue to stand with us in this battle. He continues, can you direct me to people setting up protesting in my area, Carson, California? Again, same answer. Because of the CV-19 scenario serving the power structure so well, difficult to set up any type of even peaceful demonstration. But the bottom line, we can beat them at their own game. We still have access to means of communication that we can use to help us reach a critical mass of awareness. And we are gaining ground in that arena rapidly. But we must make every single day count. Again, use your online ability to share links with authors of articles on climate, journalists, elected officials, and CC many other people. Openly CC contacts you know who are awake and aware on this issue with that message to an elected official, to a journalist, to an agency official, so that they know many people are viewing that conversation. It makes them much more accountable. Send your messages in peaceful, professional form. That's what helps us to gain ground in this battle. Thank you for standing with us, Willie. Thanks to all activists and individuals that are refusing to go silently into the night. From Sundrops, this question. Hello, Dane. Thank you for your diligent works. The question I am posing to you for the sake of others is, what would you believe to be the safest and best natural minerals in foods to help people safely detoxify from the nanotoxic spray storms that rain down on us daily? Silica helps detoxify the body from aluminum. True. Gold, a natural antitoxin, naturally binds to mercury. True also. Also, activated carbon. Sundrops continues with this. All of these I use and provide for free to others. What am I missing? What are your suggestions? My family trusts your brain, heart, and soul. Thanks again. God bless. Best wishes, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for your support in this battle. My thanks to your family. Again, it's all of us working together that can yet make a difference at this late hour. In regard to chelating these metals out of our systems, there are many, many elements that are useful for that. Even vitamin C and calcium are useful for that. And we need these elements anyway. But the more elements you take, the more you can affect other elements in your body. So it's important to do this carefully. Talk to a nutritionalist. Geoengineeringwatch.org has posted one report on this subject called Staying Healthy in a World That Isn't. If you search geoengineeringwatch.org, Staying Healthy in a World That Isn't, you'll find much more data on this. But again, elements like cilantro, good for chelating aluminum, freeing it up from your cells, but doesn't necessarily escort it out of your system. This is where elements like zeolite can be helpful. So there's a great many possibilities for chelating, but I recommend people talk to a nutritionalist so that your personal health profile can be considered in this equation. Very important to chelate carefully, but there is much we can do. But bottom line, we have to stop the source. If we don't stop the source, all the other measures we take are simply stopgap measures to an end result of planetary omnicide. We must expose and halt the climate engineering insanity, or all other points are moot. Thanks again for your question, Mark, aka Sundrops. Next question from Jake. Jake asks, what about industrial hemp to prevent soil erosion in areas affected by wildfires, capture CO2, and to bioremediate heavy metals in the soil? Is industrial hemp the miracle plant that it's been touted as all these years, or is that just wishful thinking? In regard to your question, Jake, certainly there are a great many uses for the hemp plant. It is incredibly resilient. For example, the oil from that plant, not used for any form of intoxication, but hemp oil that you can buy in your health food store in the refrigerated section, probably the best single source for essential fat lipids at this point in time, because fish oils are all contaminated. The hemp oil, again, from your health food store, is full of essential EPA fat lipids. And fats, by the way, are the most important food you can eat, the single most important food. Your cells communicate with a molecular cloud of fat. When that molecular cloud breaks down, the communication breaks down and everything else breaks down with it. That's why in the past we had the demonization, correctly so, of the hydrogenated fats that mutated this molecular membrane of fat around our cells. So essential fat lipids extremely important, and likely, just as one example, hemp oil that you can buy in your health food store in the refrigerated section, likely the single best source of essential fat lipids at this time. So that is one example. The stabilization of soils, the uptake of CO2, the industrial uses of the hemp plant. Yes, there's a great many uses of this plant. Unfortunately, too many have wanted to use it for their own recreational purposes. That calls legalities into questions, that polarizes populations, and that needs to be separated. That issue needs to be separated from the other uses of this plant. And hopefully those uses will be considered. But there are many, many other organisms that can serve a similar purpose where this controversy does not exist. Let's start with trees. In regard to trees, if the human race had any interest in surviving much longer on this planet, that should be a primary purpose of the human race, to reforest the planet. No trees, no people. The gravity and immediacy of what's unfolding at this moment in time cannot be overstated. All of it being further fueled by climate engineering operations, but by no means is that the only factor, though it is the biggest single piece in the puzzle for human destructiveness at this point in time. It does not outweigh all the other pieces combined. And that needs to be remembered, because too many people are falsely and incorrectly concluding that climate engineering is our only problem. That is not true. Climate engineering is simply disabling the planet's ability to respond to the massive amount of damage being done from human activity in countless forms. But the bottom line is the current destruction must stop. The population that remains on this planet must focus on restoring the planet's life support systems. Short of that, we have no chance. Governments all over the world know they can no longer support their populations with the planet's failing life support systems. Thus, you see the global cooperation that's occurring with the current scenario that populations all over the world face. But those same governments continue to completely deceive their populations as to what is unfolding in the world and why. And those same individuals in control think that they have the right to decide who lives and who dies. Who gave them that right? I certainly didn't. I don't know anyone who has. But it's up to us to hold them legally and morally accountable. It's up to the population to understand the paradigm we have known is over. It's not coming back. The sooner we face that reality, the more chance we have of salvaging some part of Earth's remaining life support systems. But we must make every single day count. Thank you for your question, Jake. From Rebecca, this: if we have the ability to make rainstorms, lightning, tornadoes, etc., then why are we unable to even everything out in regard to how severe the weather has been getting the last couple of years? She continues, is the severe weather due to the aftermath of things like cloud seeding? Final statement from Rebecca. And last one, I really want to know, what is the chemtrails, i.e. climate engineering, sprayed over the Pacific Northwest almost daily that often completely blocks our sunlight up here? Why are we kept in a vitamin D deficient world? The point of this is what? Thank you for your questions, Rebecca. Let me start with the first one. It's imperative to understand that those conducting the climate engineering operations are not doing this for the greater good. It is about power and control. There is nothing benevolent in these operations. They are malevolent only. In regard to your second question about the severe weather, is this a result of the cloud seeding operations? That certainly affects every weather scenario all over the world, but that doesn't mean that if climate engineering operations weren't occurring, that we would not have increasingly severe weather. We would, because the human race has decimated the planet in the geologic blink of an eye. We've cut down the forests, we've paved the land areas, we've poisoned the oceans, we've decimated the planet's life support systems. Any and every form of human activity that alters the energy balance of the planet, we're burning 100 million barrels of hydrocarbon a day. All of that has a massive effect on the planet. It's imperative to understand and remember that. So as the climate system begins to spin apart, climate engineering operations in the attempt for those in power to use that for further power and control, whether as a weapon in countries cutting off their precipitation and other countries augmenting storms, augmenting precipitation to worsen the flooding. Again, the crown jewel of the military-industrial complex is climate engineering. They can bring nations to their knees without those nations ever even realizing they were at war, and they can blame it all on nature. So the bottom line is, this is not about the greater good. Yes, we would still have increasingly severe weather without climate engineering, and in fact, there's so much pressure in the system now that has been added to by climate engineering operations. Certainly, when they stop, and one way or another they will, as industrialized, militarized civilization collapses, the blowback in the climate system will be horrific at minimum, but it must be allowed to happen. The planet must be allowed to find a new equilibrium on its own, or we have no chance. In regard to the final aspect of your question about the excessive spraying over the Pacific Northwest, that's where the moisture enters off the Pacific. That is absolutely, you're correct, heavily seeded with climate engineering elements for utilization over the rest of the country. So that is an epicenter of these operations, if you will. You're correct about that. Our final message and question for today's Climate Engineering Q&A installment is from John. John asks, with how bad of a condition this world is in, with vaccines, geoengineering, mass animal die-offs, floods, and fires destroying the crops of the world, increasing temperatures that's scorching the earth, increase of horrible health conditions because of nanoparticulates entering our bodies. You're so correct, John. Thank you. John continues with this: we are at the precipice of total collapse of this world, making it uninhabitable. As you have been saying, when you've been talking to friends and family, calling you a conspiracy theorist and other things, how can we get around this when the government, media, and Hollywood has been pushing the lies to keep people asleep? John continues, they have made the masses into sheep, going through life believing the lies being fed to them. John continues, it's getting infuriating with how many people have their fingers in their ears, not willing to listen to reason. And now people are getting this dangerous experimental vaccine with pride. posting themselves getting vaccines on the media. How do we keep from getting so discouraged from what's going on? Question mark. John finishes with this. P.S. I believe our time is much shorter than we think. Thank you. Thank you, John. And thank you for not giving up. I would agree with you on every point you made. And certainly your angst and anguish is completely rational and reasonable. It is those around you who are not rational and reasonable, behaving in the manner you described. Bottom line is, we are only responsible for what we do or don't do. We must focus on what's in our control and let go of what is not in our control. That's the only way to move this fight forward. So again, for all of us, arm yourselves with credible data from a credible source. Don't pin people into a corner and verbally rant at them. That shuts them down. That does not reach them to the core. We must collectively plant the seeds of awareness, understanding that unfolding events will soon force those seeds to sprout, whether the individuals like it or not. They can't unsee the truth once you've given it to them. If they choose to put it in some deep, dark hole in their mind, it will be forced to the surface again as they are forced to face the unfolding reality. Plant seeds, move on. Don't pound your head against a particular wall that won't move. Walk around that wall and keep sowing seeds. Again, always remember what is within your control and what is not. And remember this, never forget this. No one can take your will. No one. It belongs to each of us alone. It has been given to us to protect. It is the only thing that we truly own. Our will, our morality, our virtue, our honor. Those have been entrusted to each of us to make the most of it in this life. And the question is this, what do we want to be found doing when our part in the play is up? Let's remain at our posts and continue to sound the alarm no matter what. And if we collectively do so, we can yet affect the equation profoundly, even at this late hour. Those in power are not gods and we are not helpless. Let's face the gathering storm head on. Never give up. I'm out of time for this week's session of Climate Engineering Q&A. My deepest thanks to all that have submitted questions. To those that have submitted questions that I was not able to get to yet, I'll do my best to answer as many as possible in the next installment of Climate Engineering Q&A. If you wish to submit a question, please do so at questions@geoengineeringwatch.org. Until next week, stay safe, stay strong. This is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.